This is Nursing Uncensored. Your host, Adrianne Benning, invites you to listen in on conversations between real nurses about the crazy and wonderful lives we lead. This is a space meant to create laughter in addition to serious conversations, and nothing is off limits. Listen in as we bear it all for you. Tender ears beware, though. We are often not safe for work. Welcome back to Nursing Uncensored and part 2 of my conversation with flight nurse and author of the Flight Nurse Bible, A Field Guide to Awesomeness, Robert P. Harris. There is still so much to talk about, so let's not waste any time and get right back to it. So I want to jump topic because there's other things that I'm excited.
We got 4 hours if I'm going to hold the record, so I mean we got to keep this going.
So, you talk about, in the book, you talk about narcotic accountability, medication accountability. And this is something that I hold near and dear to me because I don't fuck around. And I don't want to fuck around with anybody who fucks around. So here's I'll just start with my philosophy. Because we in medicine, like if you have a pre-filled syringe that has X amount of drug in it and the order is only for a portion of that, we in my facility don't do multiple administration from one vial or syringe or whatever. So if you've got 2 milligrams of Ativan in a syringe and you're only giving half a milligram, which why would you do? Anyway, you have to squirt out 1.5 milligrams and waste it, however your facility wastes appropriately, with the witness of another licensed professional. So here's the thing. Yeah. You put your finger down, you put your fingerprint on it, you legally enter into a legal record that could be subpoenaed that you watched this medication be wasted.
That will be subpoenaed.
That will be, yes. And that your person wasting it is not like pocketing that half a Dilaudid that they just cut in half. So this is not like people lose licenses over this. People get in fucking a lot of trouble for this, especially because drug diversion sometimes is difficult to figure out, especially if it's someone that you've worked with a long time. They're your friend. Oh no, not Susie Q. Yeah, Susie Q. So when I waste with people, I want to watch you pop that top, or I want to watch you crack that seal. I want to see the pill in this unsealed package before we waste it. Because how the fuck you talk about, and I'll let you tell the story, but you talk about there's a way that people who have drug diverting habits, for whatever reason, there are tricks for making you think that they just gave that patient. So will you talk a little bit about that and about your philosophy of, because it's not just we're in a med room with a camera pointed at us and a machine in front of us and people coming in and out. You're right. A guy.
Absolutely. Well, first of all, as much fun as we're having and, we're flipping birds and dropping F-bombs and having a good old time on a Saturday morning. Ooh, did I just make that topical? Maybe you can cut that.
That's good. No, anyway, that's good. That's
all right, cool. Anyway, I mean, neither one of us are working anytime soon. We're having a good time. But when you're in the thick of it, there's narcotics. And in a flight world, it's nurse or nurse paramedic, and depending upon where you're at, you'll either have your own separate narc boxes, or the RN will have. And once again, this is Adrianne set me up so beautifully for this, but this truly is almost word for word from the chapter. And there are elements of this for legal reasons I have to leave out, but the essential story was I noticed a pattern of behavior in a regular partner of mine who I first learned it when I was actually on orientation. This is one of my first flight partners. And there was a third rider who was a more experienced nurse than me who saw something weird. And then after the fact said, you need to watch that guy. Okay. Thanks for the heads up. I mean, could you be more specific? But
yeah.
It was a thing. And with narcotic accountability. And essentially, long story short, what this gentleman, who shall remain nameless, was doing was he was pulling out a saline-filled vial from a pocket in his flight suit or pant leg pocket, or here's what would happen. we would administer a narcotic, or we would discuss, hey, the patient needs some analgesia, and we would agree upon, let's give a milligram of Dilaudid, or let's give a zero 0.5 of Dilaudid, or you know what, let's give 50 mics of fentanyl and see where we go, whatever it was.
Mm-hmm.
And we would agree upon it. And then all of a sudden I'd turn around and my partner would already have popped open a vial of Dilaudid and be like, oh, well, I already popped it. Oh,
Mm-hmm.
okay, well, let's just draw that up. Okay, moron. Okay, sure, fine. Okay, so much for teamwork. And he would pull it up and we would administer it. And this might be on scene, it might be at the bedside hospital, bedside at the hospital, or it might be in a sand dune somewhere. I mean, who knows?
Mm-hmm.
And then he would pocket the vial and whatever. And at some point, during the administration process, he would either drop or misplace or be like, oh, I need an alcohol prep to wipe the site. And when he would go into his pocket, I call it the narc vial switching trick.
Mm-hmm.
And it happens in hospitals too. And this dude, it turns out he'd been doing it for years, and he played a lot of people, and I was the one who busted him. And he would go into his pocket for an alcohol prep, and whoopsie doopsie, pull out a saline-filled vial that he'd stolen previously.
Flash of the hand, and suddenly he's got, where'd the narc go? Oh, it's right here in my hand. Ooh, surprise.
Oh, and I didn't catch it once, but the other nurse who was my preceptor said, watch him. And I was partnered up with him for a few more shifts. I got him dead to rights the second time. And I knew, but he wasn't impaired. And so I had a suspicion. But I also say in the book, well, wouldn't the patient's lack of pain or lack of effect from the medicine be like a red light warning? Yeah, it would be.
Mm-hmm.
And then the same person would drop an actual narcotic dose and slam it so the patient shuts up.
Ooh. And then suddenly they seem okay now. Well,
they seem fine now. It's all good.
Mm-hmm.
After this happened, the once on my preceptorship, and then the second time that I really was like, okay, I pulled him aside afterwards, and then I would love to pretend it was a Tom Cruise, up against the wall, kind of,
yeah, like not fucking happening.
But I said, listen, and it was maybe some, in his flight suit chest. What are you doing? I'm not going to get fired because of you. And then the most unexpected thing happened. And once again, the book. But I tell this whole story in the book. He broke down crying, bawling. Like he wanted help so bad. And he confided in me he'd been doing this for years. And he'd just been taking the place blind. And his wife was addicted. And he was addicted. And he ended up, I forced his resignation, and he was terminated. And we did it as friends. He's gone through counseling, and occasionally I'll reach out to him and see how he's doing in his rehab and his new life. He's not in healthcare anymore. He lost his license. Was very, he was dealt with. And because there's no play, we cannot play with that. It kills
providers, including nurses and EMTs, and like shit kills people.
And not only that, but it was just the dishonesty. Yeah. And you are literally depriving a trauma patient of pain medicine for personal gain until your partner's like, I don't think that pain medicine's working. Oh, well, let's give them some more pain medicine. But that's the first it's despicable. And so I fried the dude, and I have no apologies for it. And
you may have saved his life for somebody else's. And at the very minimum, you saved a lot of people from being in fucking excruciating pain that they don't need to fucking be in.
It pissed me off. It pissed me off. And so I tell everybody, I'll trust you with my life if you're worthy. And I may trust you with my wife, but I will never trust you with my narcotics.
If you weren't going to quote that, I was, because that is fucking gold.
You're the best, Adrian. You're the best. All right. So may I give a quick bit about stethoscopes?
Please.
Because you love your stethoscope.
I do.
You have an intimate connection to a stethoscope.
I have a fiery passion for my stethoscope.
And I've noticed that, being a fan of yours. And as you may or may not have noticed, in the back of the book, I have a gear section where I talk about certain tidbits. And now, everyone listening, I'm going to have to be very careful on how I word this so that I don't get sued like crazy. So essentially, if you go on Amazon or eBay, and while you're on Amazon doing this, you could feel free to pick up a copy of the Flight Nurse Bible, which I hear good things about.
I recommend
And
it.
I'll plug. I'm a whore. I don't care. It's a good book. It's worth it. Anyway, I tell all my EMTs this when I'm working CCT, and I tell all my partners this, and it's what I personally carry. If you go online and you type in, I have to pick my words carefully here. If you type in cardiology specific replica tubing, and you can even get tactical black, tactical pink. That'd be something, wouldn't it? maybe
I don't know what terrain you're in then.
Yeah, I don't. Well, I'm here in San Diego, and maybe at Pride down the street.
Ooh, yeah, you blend right in.
I'm telling you, if you haven't been to San Diego, come on down. Let's party. Anyway,
it's on my list.
Should be. Anyway, so you get replacement tubing. There's one very popular brand name of stethoscope. Can't quite remember what they're called, but it rhymes with, you know who I'm talking about. The very lovely, expensive stethoscopes.
Mm-hmm.
And you can get replica tubing for that brand. This is a two-part process. And you can get it on Amazon or eBay of your chosen color. And it's a thick-walled tubing. It's typically a cardiac-specific sort of terminology. And you can get that for about $30 for replacement tubing. Nice. Then we come to the diaphragm, the head of the stethoscope. Well, okay, that's really what you're paying for with these brand names. Mm-hmm. Well, if you do a little Google search again for whatever special brand name, the only brand name, replica, you can find that stethoscope head. And you could do this on Amazon, eBay. I even found it on that one awesome Chinese website that sell all the cool stuff for like 5 cents and stuff. Anyway, can't think of it right now, or I'd plug them. But you can get that, and you plug a $30 replica piece from this amazing stethoscope company into a replica piece from this other amazing stethoscope company. You plug them together, and for $60, you just made a $300 worthy stethoscope in a color of your choice. I wrote the Flight Nurse Bible. I do this for a living. I love stethoscopes.
He knows.
$60, you're set. You don't give them the money. They don't need it. They got plenty. I also mentioned how stethoscopes are worthless to a flight nurse. Because I carry one because I have to. Because I might listen at the bedside. I might listen on scene. But, okay, if stethoscopes are so freaking important, why do flight nurses wear helmets? What am I? Oh, no, not going to happen. There's nothing you're going to learn if you're a talented flight knight, as you mentioned earlier. I love that. There's nothing you're going to learn that a good set of vitals, good eyes on the patient with a physical assessment, and end-tidal CO2, so better quality.
Absolutely.
A full set of vitals and good objective analysis that a stethoscope's not going to tell you. It's worthless in a running helicopter. And arguably,
you can't, even if you didn't have a helmet on, would you be able to hear shit anyway?
No, absolutely not.
I hear a murmur. What?
Yeah. Oh, wait, I believe that we might be listening to
rotors.
Okay, so I totally took that from Robin Williams in Good Morning Vietnam, but that was fucking hilarious still. Anyway. I love doing that. Good. Okay, Tom, we're here from bringing you the live cam in the morning. Oh, it looks like the I-15 freeway is back.
I'm going to have to use that for an episode one day.
That's good, right? Yeah,
that's good.
All right. Anyway, don't pay the money. Go piece it together and use two common sense things, and you'll find a $300 stethoscope you can make for $50. Because if you are using it right, it's getting smashed, bashed, dashed. You leave your car in the summer on one day.
For sure.
Anyway, moving on. That's my get me sued for stethoscope comment stuff. which I'm sure is what Adrianne wanted to spend 20 minutes on. So
Yeah, yeah, always, always. I love it.
I love your pink stethoscope though. That had your thing that you said you
Thanks.
gifted to
Yeah,
someone.
yeah.
That
So
was such
I
so
did
touching.
the first stethoscope that I was given. It was from that company, that nice company that makes nice stethoscopes. But it was like their super
They
base
make the
model. It
best.
was
I'm
like
not
they
robbing
do.
from them. They
It was
make the best.
yeah, yeah. It was like the baby stethoscope of theirs, and it was gifted to me. I gifted it to someone else when I upgraded and got my pink engraved love. But then also, I will say this because this is so vitally important because we all got to stick together. So I like to thrift shop. I love antique stores, used clothing stores, even if it's a fucking junk shop, I can find an amazing thing. So I'm one day in just, I don't know, it was like Goodwill or something. It was just like your random resale shop. And I see a fucking Littman with a broken diaphragm laying in a box with a $2 price tag on it. And there was a nurse that had just started on my unit. Great potential, but it had kind of a rough start. And she was using the like $2 piece of shit stuff. We're a pulmonary unit. Like, don't use the $2 piece of shit that they got from the storage room.
No.
So I gifted the stethoscope to her and she was so excited about it. And I was like, this is what you got to do. Like, you got to pay it forward. You got to watch out for the people that are, because one thing that you talk about, even though it's not just about like, liking the people, like I said, I'm lucky I like the people I work with, but you have to be able to trust the people you work with, and you're
Yes.
only as strong as your weakest link. So if
Absolutely.
you've got a nurse that is on a pulmonary floor or any floor really, and you see that they're maybe you're using equipment that like, let me guide you, let me help you, let
What are
me.
you hoping to hear with that $15
Right,
POS? I
right,
mean,
right.
nothing.
And then you see, oh, they keep charting diminished. It's not their lungs that are diminished. It's the fucking stethoscope that is diminished. So I'm in favor of find a stethoscope that works for you, that sits in your ears right, learn how to use it, and then do everything in your power to keep it. I have a tracking device on mine because I'll be damned if I'm going to lose it in the laundry or around some resident's neck.
Yeah.
So that's
Mine only cost $60 because
yeah, yeah.
you
So
know, I
mine
don't.
has the amplifier on it because I wanted.
Oh, well, I was going to bring that up. Okay, that this company that we're not mentioning, they
Mm-hmm.
make a product that is truly amazing. Okay, if I'm going to
They
plug them,
do.
and I don't know who I'm plugging because I would never mention the name of the
I
company,
don't know. I don't know.
but if I'm plugging them, okay, check out their digital one. It is so dope. It is.
Yeah,
Oh
yeah.
my god, it's
And
really cool.
I've tried out a number of digital ones that other nurses, and it was before I had gotten my amplifier, and mine was just an attachment that I put on my pre-existing stethoscope. And it's like anything. If you crank up the volume up to the top, you're going to get some fuzz. But if you hit that mid-level, oh,
Mm-hmm.
the shit you can
Waka
hear.
boom, waka boom, waka
And
boom,
I can
waka
and
boom,
I
waka.
can chart sounds in all lobes, like I can hear every lobe of your lungs, which I'm taking care of patients that just had new lungs put in their bodies. I don't have time to fuck around.
Particularly relevant in the in-hospital environment and in
Yeah,
the
but
pulmonary care environment. In my world, it's mostly thumbs up or thumbs down.
right. And
And then
also
so I have a very specific opinion about stethoscopes. I don't mean to diminish them. They're an
no,
essential
but
tool.
it's proof that like you need to know your job and know what your tools are and which ones
Yes.
are not going to help you. Yeah, if your patient is coding, you're not going to go, let me listen and see if they hear. No, put some fucking patches on them and assess your patient. So I mean, but you do that a lot. You're probably like sticking patches on people so you can see if they're in some fucked up rhythm. I mean,
Yeah,
yeah.
that's kind of the first thing. Well, the first one is, Annie, are you okay? Annie, are
Right,
you
right. Annie,
okay?
Annie.
And
Can you hear
yeah,
me?
and then from there, the wonderful thing about being a flight nurse is that, well, the training's ridiculous. The protocols are 500 to 600 pages, and you also have physician reference via satellite phone should you need it, because you end up in
Mhm.
a spot where you're like, this ain't
Oh
going well.
shit.
And
Hmm.
that's a whole separate podcast of worst case scenario. Whereas I say in the
Uh-huh.
book, WCS. I'm trying to make
Hmm.
that a new acronym. Uh, it's an acronym if you can pronounce. Anyway, whatever.
Yeah,
Uh,
yeah. No, I get you. I get you.
WCS, worst case scenario. But the, you got to prioritize your tools, and it's truly. Yeah, I say it in one of the commandments as well. that I love, and it says, and what's one of the earlier things my father taught me, and it's the third, take that back, it's the fourth flight nurse commandment of the 12, and it says, do not get tunnel vision.
Mm-hmm.
Stop severe bleeding. Put on the tourniquet where you need to put on the tourniquet. If it doesn't require a tourniquet, deal with it in a second. But if you need a tourniquet, put it on now. Needle decompress both sides of the chest.
Mm-hmm.
Quite often, you're like, well, tracheal deviation, that's late. If you see,
mm-hmm. Shit's already.
They're dying if you see that.
Mm-hmm.
So just if you don't know what side you're dealing with, but you got 2 or 3 sets of vitals that are all tanking together, boom, bam, bam. Don't mark my anatomical thing. Although I think ironically this RN shirt might line it.
Yeah, there you go.
No, it's outside. Boom, boom. I have to work on that. Might be good.
Yeah, essentially,
anyway, and then secure the airway. The
mm-hmm.
airways after that, obviously,
mm-hmm.
But and other things. But you're right. The priorities change and the tools change. But
as situation dictates. Your favorite phrase. See, I read this
good, Adrianne.
book. I read
You're
this
good.
fucking book.
You're good. Wow, that really just like that made me
tear up a little bit.
You're so sweet. Oh my.
I will say I do have a bone to pick with you about something else.
Let's do
this. Anyway, finish what you were saying, because you were saying don't get tunnel vision. Go through your checklist. Make sure you're not just overly focusing on one thing and missing the whole big picture.
Sure. I mean, people are going to be bloody. People are going to be messed up. Find things that are going to kill them immediately. Arterial bleeds,
mm-hmm.
the bright red are squirting stuff out of them. Stop that. If there's massive chest trauma, and it takes a matter of time to secure an airway, and you're putting them on a monitor. There's so many things happening at once.
Right.
The way they teach medicine and PHTLS or even TNCC or whatever, it's linear. It's A, B, C, D, E. They need to teach it that way so they know that you know the steps. But in reality,
it's like all at once. It's everything all at once. At the same
Everything's
time.
happening at the same time, and you're working with an equally skilled partner, and 15 things are happening in 10 seconds, and it's amazing. Mm-hmm. And you're working with the ground crews that are also amazing. So many things are happening all at once. But I've seen, you can YouTube or Google image post-mortem tension pneumothoraxes that were missed. And the aorta's over here.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's
so
huge.
Bad.
And that could have been fixed instantly. And so whenever you're going through a flight boot camp, there's sort of a joke, they always throw you some random distracting trauma call or whatever it is. It's sort of a thing where whenever you're entering a scenario where you're being tested, you just pull out, you verbalize for a lot of these, but you're wearing your flight suit with all your gear and you're just like, hi, my name is Rob. Oh, your name is Cindy? Okay, cool. Dart. Just so you like check. It's like in case you had a pneumothorax. Yeah, you don't have a pneumothorax now, do you? Because they were trying to stump you. It's the whole point of the thing. So it's sort of a trick of just dart them from the onset. Hi, I'm Nurse Rob. I'll be caring for you today. Pop. Now what you got? It's an old joke, but
no,
all right, so
I get it. I get it. I have a bone to pick with you. It's not really a bone to pick. I get it. Okay, so when I was in nursing classes, here we go. When I was in nursing classes, I did the night and weekend program. I've talked about this, and there were like 5 or 6 people that were like in class with me at any given time. And so that becomes, but also like I was a night shifter, so I had just woken up, like I was trying to eat on my way to class. I had a 30-minute drive. I had to get there. Sure. It's cold. It's winter, whatever. And so I would try.
Sorry, I'm from San Diego. I don't know.
Yeah, you have no idea.
No, continue.
No, but basically, like I would pick the quietest snacks I could think of for class because I was so fucking hungry. But you don't want to be the person sitting in the front row going chewing on like carrots, chips, like. I've seen people that have brought out like their entire Subway sandwich in class, but they're like eating it with the paper wrapped around it so they don't get like lettuce fall out on the desk. And then it's just like you're not only are you listening to them through the whole fucking lecture, but also the bone to pick is kind of like, dude, I gotta fucking eat. I gotta go to work after class. I'm sorry, my chips bug you. But then you said that you would like take a Kleenex and you like lay Kleenex out on the table. Dump that shit out of your bag. If you want to eat just don't put your hand in the bag 700,000 times during a lecture because it's distracting. So I was partly like, yeah, I get it. And part of me was like, good problem with me eating my chips. I got to go to work. What the fuck?
Well, not to mention brand names, but chips that I guess are harvested by the sun.
The
Uh,
loudest bag ever created by
oh
human.
my goodness! I literally was sitting in a refresher course recently for who knows what it was, but and this ironically the book had been published already, and so I've been referencing that certain times for funny things. And this woman pulled out an apple sitting across from me, and I just went,
Oh, Lord.
"No!" I was like,
Don't.
"Bad, no, very bad.
Smack that hand.
Do not do that."
No.
But if you actually, I can read it funny because it actually reads really funny. This is page 42 in the book. Man, it's just really fun. I'll just read it real quick
Please do.
because I'm doing the audio book right now, actually, for the year anniversary release.
Nice. Awesome.
So this is good practice for me. But all right, one of my greatest pet peeves, I'm reading now. One of the greatest pet peeves is the inconsiderate crinkling of food bags in between crunching and chewing. It's not bad enough I have to listen to your crunching and chewing, but then I must hear your hand repeatedly go into the bag and root around for another handful crinkling away. Crinkle, crinkle, crinkle. Crunch, crunch, crunch. Crinkle, crinkle, crinkle. Crunch, crunch, crunch. Crinkle, crinkle, crinkle. Crunch, crunch. No! Stop it! Ah! And that's in the book. This is no more. Stop it. This is why plates, napkins, and paper towels exist. You can dump the contents of whatever food bag onto it and keep the people around you from wanting to strangle you. Whenever I'm either teaching a class, and quite often while I'm attending one, I always bring a stack of napkins to place on a table, and I tell everyone, I don't care if you eat in class, but I don't want to hear you eat. And if anyone in here thought they were going to eat an apple in a closed, tight room full of people trying to learn, forget it. Anyway, I could go on and on and on.
But... And then I do love that you say, "Oh, where is it? Hold on." I always feel like I'm part of a primatology study at the zoo whenever I go to a movie theater.
Oh my goodness, I can't do it. If you ever see me in a movie theater, which Miss Jenny just loves, it's so funny. Like, I have to be heavily sedated in one form or another, and I put on a hoodie, and I have a 40-ounce Jack and whatever, and I'm sitting in the front row with the screen right there, and I pretend I'm the only person there with earplugs in, and I enjoy the experience. Otherwise, it's ruined for me. I just can't do it. It's like let's put a few hundred people in a room together, give them all crunchy food, and just see who starts punching someone first. No, I don't.
Yeah. So I both relate, and I was also deeply offended. No, but I was the person that was like, "Oh shit, I got to eat this before I go into the classroom." I'm like shoveling in food in the car because I'm like, "There's no way I'm going to get through this whole bag in class." And you don't want to be the person that's like putting a chip in their mouth and then like kind of sucking on it for a second so it's not so loud and crunchy. Like I've done that before too. I'm like, I'm just gonna put this Cheeto in my cheek for a second.
Right.
I'm so fucking hungry.
Glucose stabs. They're quiet.
That happens. Okay, so let's see. What else are we covering here? Oh yeah. So one of the other things, it's more of a question than a comment. So chapter 12, other safety equipment. That's what this chapter is. Okay. So we're on page 70.
Absolutely. Yep.
So there's a particular phrase that okay, here I'm just going to read it. You can get very injured. We're talking about helmets, the helmet visors, having your visor down. You can get very injured kissing a seagull, red-tailed hawk, sparrow, bat, or raccoon at 100 knots. Protect your face. How the fuck you going to get hit in the face with a raccoon? I need to know what's going. I mean, maybe some hyperbole, but has there ever been a situation where a non-flying animal has been somewhere in a dangerous spot for you? Like, what is this?
Well, the raccoon was comedy. However, I have growing up in Appalachia, I have had pet raccoons, and they're an animal near and dear to my heart.
Yeah.
I've literally had a raccoon that would let me cradle it, and I've just and then. But what's so amazing about raccoons is they can live, if domesticated, in the wild. They can eat anything. Mm-hmm, they can eat dirt, berries, tree bark. You never have to worry about a raccoon. They will be fine. And so there's been occasions where we found it.
I was like, I had to ask about
No, it's a good question. I just love raccoons, and I thought it was funny. But the point is, you're going to be involved in a lot of bird strikes. I've had
Mhm.
a couple of myself, and fortunately, they haven't been penetrating bird strikes. But my father is also a flight paramedic, and he was on a call once, and him and his partner, they had a, I, I, I don't want, it, I think it was an endangered bird, so I don't want to make anyone mad by saying what it was, but it was a big bird. It went through the front windshield, missed my father's head by about 4 inches, and missed the paramedic's head who was sitting in the
Oh
back by
shit.
about 4 inches. And this bird that weighed about as much as a Christmas turkey smashed into the wall and
Oh
feathers
my
and guts
god.
whenever there's pictures of it that it was so bad the company was like, no, have you cannot use those pictures because it'll like it's so scary and dangerous. I've hit I'm not a pilot, but I've been into planes. This one time actually, it's kind of amusing. It's sad for the bird. I know. I'm sorry, Peter. But we're saving lives here. Sometimes birds don't know what we are. And we were flying in the middle of the night. We have night vision goggles on, and we were taking off from this one base, and we were starting to get up to altitude, and we were picking up speed, and we're hauling ass. And then all of a sudden, out of nowhere, I see this group of three birds, like in a flash of, it's like coming at us off to the side because you see lots of stuff. And this one bird, you could tell at the last moment, he was the one closest to us, and you could tell he was like, and he made the wrong turn. He was like left, right, and bam, he hit right in
Oh.
front of my. And I have a photograph that I can't share because it has company information on it and stuff, but because it wasn't. But we immediately turned around and landed, and it literally looks like you threw a handful of mud at the windshield when a bird
Oh
hits you at 120
god.
knots.
Oh.
And but it was so sad. Like he was like, this is bad, and then
I can't.
bam.
It's like when you're trying to like pass somebody in a doorway and you do
Oh
that whole, like
man.
which way you go? Which
Oh
way am I go? Oh, oh. Yeah,
yeah, he got
except this with
smeared.
much worse
And,
results.
and then unfortunately, quite often when bats are breeding during their
Oh
seasons,
yeah.
especially if you're out in the southwest regions like I am mostly, and through a lot
Mhm.
of a lot of
Well, we have a
valleys,
lot of
deserts.
bats here, even in Iowa. Like
Oh
we
yeah,
get batty. Yeah,
yeah, you don't say.
we get
Um,
batty.
in many ways, uh, we've actually, I love bats. They're fascinating to me.
They're great.
But
Yeah, yeah.
uh, you'll feel them. You'll hit them. You'll be like, what was that?
A little
Okay.
like boom on the
Yeah,
side of
and
the.
then
Oh.
but it won't set off any alarms. The pilot is, we're either going to stop and set it down and look at what's going on, or we're going to continue on. But there's been several occasions afterwards people looked around and we've been like,
Oh.
this little poor little guy off the side.
Just
He's like,
peel it right
oh,
off. Oh.
and bats are so sweet, and they're just, it's so funny. Sam Harris does a funny bit talking about the poor evolution of rats. He says like bats are rats with wings, and people are sometimes scared of them, but generally they love them because they got wings. They're little mammals that fly. They're rats with
Yeah, they
wings.
got those little
Crazy.
fingers that you can see.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then he talks about squirrels. He talks about people love squirrels because they're rats with cute fluffy
They
tails.
have
So he
the
goes,
yeah.
man, but talk about the rat. What an animal that evolved in the wrong direction. People hate rats, but people love squirrels. People
Mm-hmm.
generally love bats unless they're just
Mm-hmm.
silly. But we kind of
Yeah.
went on a
No.
rabbit trail there, but
Oh.
that was fun.
No, but that's true. This is a thing that you have to think about because not only is there the hazard of the helicopter, the airplane not working, plus the shit that you're doing, and like sometimes when you're trying to work on a moving target, it's dangerous. You don't want to poke yourself with something. You don't want to like there's just so much to consider when you're already moving, and then to think that you have shit like hitting you up the side of the head and like really dangerous. Like we're not.
And the point in that, it was under the safety section, as you mentioned,
Mhm.
and it's the fact that we have on our crash-resistant helmets, which
Mhm.
people wear them around on scene. Sometimes we'll get out of the helicopter with the helmets on, and this is one of my beefs, and I talk about it in the book. And
How do you
maybe it's controversial. Whatever your company says, do it. Be a good
follow
person.
protocols? Mm-hmm.
Yes, yes, yes. But personally, it's not designed for anything other than to protect your cranium in a helicopter crash. If you walk into the tail rotor or you're turning into human confetti. It's not going to make a
Yep,
difference.
you're done.
And nobody else, the cops and the firefighters, unless they're doing fire, they're not wearing helmets on scene unless they're actively engaged and stuff. So why are we walking around? We can't hear you to take a report. I mean, it's just so silly, and it includes our vision. But when we're in flight, we have nighttime and daytime, dark and clear lenses. And the idea is absolutely to protect your vision. I also wear an under pair. I have a pair I switch out day and night for
Mhm.
additional protection for when I have that up.
Yeah.
And but the point is that that blast shield, as you were, Luke Skywalker blast shield, uh, that's there for a reason. And by the way, the reason I created the term flight night, and this is a story, not an anecdote. If there's anyone I'm afraid of being sued by, it's George Lucas. Oh, I'm sorry, Disney now. And
Mm-hmm.
so I had a lot of Jedi references in the book originally in the first draft. And then, all of a sudden I started Googling people that have had their lives taken away from lawsuits. And I'm like, well, we're getting rid of the word Jedi. And so I replaced Jedi with Flight Night. And so that's
Mm-hmm.
where that actually came from.
And I do like that because it brings about not only the seriousness and the gravity of the position, but also you think of knights as being rescuers. I mean, my high school mascot were the knights. And so I have a special place in my heart for knights. But yeah, no, it's true. It also brings about that evokes that connotation of like honor, nobility, honesty, virtue, like that. I mean, not that I know all knights were virtuous. I know that there was like some not virtuous knights. But in general, like I like that term. I like that I wish I had some kind of like, I don't know, I need a title or something. But yeah, Flight Night
You
is a great.
do. The Uncensored Nurse
I
Badass
I
Podcast
guess,
lady,
I
Adrianne
guess.
Benning. I mean, come on. We're
Okay, so I do
famous.
I do want to just over into a topic that
All
actually
right.
that I didn't know this is what it was called, but I've perceived this in my practice. So we talk about you talk about the rousability threshold. Now I had
Mm,
never heard that phrase used
yeah.
before, but because I do a lot of end of life care and we have a lot of patients that maybe are we don't do straight up sedation, like we're not propofol sedating people, but we're like using ketamine and Ativan and like other things to help maintain calm because people get this
Yeah.
like terminal restlessness. But it's true, I work nights, and so you think hospitals are loud at night, but for me there's like this, I'm incredibly protective of quiet and darkness, especially for my patients that are getting shit tons of ketamine and Ativan and Haldol, because they're already being drugged, within, we keep it safe. We're not respiratorily depressing them. Is that even a phrase? We're not
Absolutely, it
we're
is.
not hastening death, but we need to keep them at this level where they're like not fucking thrashing around and clearly in pain. So I am one of those people that I don't give a shit if they haven't been rousable in weeks. I turn down the lights, turn off
Yes.
the fucking blaring TV. Don't be
Absolutely.
super loud when you're in their room because their brain is still perceiving stimulation. So it's the same. So you talk about this a little bit when you've got a patient that you're like you've intubated them or you're trying to keep them sedated. Talk about the rousability threshold and how you handle this.
Man, you really just bring it down to some really honest, good stuff. And I love that. And
But this is all stuff that speaks to me. Like this is very selfish. This is
I'm
like me
looking
being like,
down because
I want to
I'm
talk
skimming
about
to,
this.
to
Oh,
bring up
it's
the reference
yeah,
as
it's
well.
page
Yeah.
71. You talk about like even
Yeah.
putting earplugs in your patients because the sound of a fucking helicopter from the sky is loud. Now when you're in it, and I've had patients that have been like conscious during transport, like just from hospital to hospital transport, and they're like, "Whoa, that helicopter ride was loud." And it's like, yeah.
Well, essentially, the big battle we have is between comfort, sedation, and vital signs that are sustainable to life.
Mhm.
I mean, it's,
Right.
and I mention a very, very blatant situation, and I teach a lot with nurses and in the transport world, and I pretty much chose one of the most frustrating events that we come across early on, and it's you're going to walk into a room, and if you don't mind, I'll just describe real quick.
Please do.
You're going to walk into a room to transport this patient for whatever reason from point A to point B, and they're intubated, they have restraints on, and they're on some form of, maybe it's propofol, maybe it's, I don't know. You know what? This is a healthcare podcast. We could say medication
Yeah,
names.
yeah. Sure, sure.
Uh, they're probably on some propofol. maybe Precedex nowadays, which
Mm-hmm,
is,
mm-hmm.
I understand the purpose. It doesn't depress the respiratory center. It helps you wean earlier. It promotes everything that we're trying to do to get people out earlier to prevent ventilator-acquired pneumonia and all. I'm
Mm-hmm.
so on board with that. But in the nursing world of transport, Precedex is a pain in my ass because they're awake, and I need them to be not awake because I don't want
Mm-hmm.
to torture them. And
Right.
so quite often people will be on 25 mics of fentanyl per hour on a drip and on some Precedex, and they're wide awake, bucking the tube, struggling. You walk
Mm-hmm.
in,
Mm-hmm.
and might I add to this, especially if they're on propofol, it's, 90/50 blood pressure.
Mm-hmm.
It's okay. They're wide awake in a quiet room, tied down with no stimulation, bucking the tube miserable.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, I wish this wasn't the case. This is heartbreaking, but it
Yeah.
is the case. And I walk into this all the time. I had this case literally the night before last. And I do it almost weekly, at least once or twice. And you have a choice. You can either grip it and rip it and be like, oh, you're fine, and just drag them from one bed
You're
to the other.
alive. This
Yeah,
sucks for you, but you're alive.
yeah. Or we're 90/50 with our blood pressure. We have a very bad blood pressure. And
You ain't got room for further sedation.
no, we don't. I can't go up on that propofol. It's going to kill you. I
Mm-hmm.
can't Michael Jackson you,
Mm-mm.
and I know. I mean, milk of amnesia, as once again Robin Williams called it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I'd like to thank my anesthesiologist. I can't remember his fucking name. Anyway, that's all Robin Williams. Anyway, so we're going into this situation, and I say it very plainly. I said, what do we do now? Because we have to transport this patient, we have to sedate them, and we have to protect their vital signs. We start a pressor. We start a vasoactive medication that will increase their vital signs, called a pressor, shortened vasopressor. There are
Mm-hmm.
many types. It's a long conversation, and I don't even dive too deep into it in the book. You have alpha
Mm-hmm.
effect, beta effect, combo effect,
Right,
and
right.
there are many, many smarter people than me that write that out, and I have all their books referenced. But I essentially just say we need to elevate their blood pressure with a pressor to a point where we can then up the sedation and
Without
knock
tanking
them
them.
without
Right.
taking them. First things first, start, and yes, we titrate by effect. I'm going to start at dopamine at 5, and then I'm going to go to 10, and then I'm going to go to 15, 4 minutes
Mm-hmm.
apart each time, whatever the checklist says.
Yep.
And
Follow your protocol.
my point is, I'm going to protect their perfusion. And
Mm-hmm.
by perfusion, I ultimately mean a radial pulse, but I'm looking for systolics in the low 100s, decent 120s, 130s, something that
Mm-hmm.
I can then go up on the propofol or up on the fentanyl, combo, or maybe they're on Versed as whatever,
Mm-hmm.
to
Mm-hmm.
protect that drop so that we don't, because the second you decrease perfusion pressure, you increase their mortality by, I don't want to make up numbers, but there are many documented studies that show exponentially. Like, it's like,
Right.
wow,
Huge.
it doesn't take long for the brain to suffer. And people will
Mm-hmm.
literally sometimes just take patients bucking the tube and they'll just take them across town on an hour ride. And
I
because
can't even look at people in that condition, let alone ride with them for an hour. It's
I've
like,
seen people do it, and they walk by me while I'm on another call or doing something else, and
you're like, what the fuck?
who taught you? And whereas we either have pressors that we will start and use, or I can ask the sending facility for a pressor to start, and they'll
Mm-hmm.
be happy to give it to me because they want me gone. And so I'll start that. We'll get the vitals up to this amazing place, and I can do whatever I want. And then, and the family's in the room too, and I'm telling them what we're doing, and the family's like, yes, please,
Please make them look not like they're having the
yeah,
worst fucking experience a human could have. Because what for those that aren't in healthcare, if you have it, even if you are not conscious or aware of what you're doing, if somebody jams something anywhere in your body, your basic monkey brain reaction is to rip that shit out. So if somebody jams an airway down your trachea, if you're not restrained, I mean, people say, oh, you restrain, that's so cruel. Why don't you? No, we have to
no,
restrain them because there's a thing called self-extubation. And then there's the trauma of, are you going to be able to get that fucking airway back in? And if you do get it back in, how many minutes are they going to be without ventilation before you? So there's all this shit to consider. So yeah, these people have to be literally tied down arms usually, sometimes legs, depending on how much they're fighting. And how do you feel knowing that your loved one, your family member, your best friend, your spouse is in this situation? So yeah, you
Absolutely.
have to
Yeah.
have these tactics. So that's very smart. If you bring their blood pressure up a little bit, then you've got room to bring it back down.
Absolutely. And I'm not saying let's get crazy. Let's
No.
little bits here, little bits there. And I mean, when I was writing the book, I literally, because I've been doing this for quite a long time, I will appropriately, so it's not rude, fold things over the patient's eyes to
Mhm.
decrease internal, perceived light stimuli.
Mhm.
And of course, I have to explain to the family what I'm doing. This
Right.
is okay. This is for them. And I always put in earplugs. And this is also explained out in the book. But when I came up with the term Rousability Threshold, I actually Googled through the NCBI dot the NLM, does the National Institutes of Health. Like I went on that website. I'm like,
Mhm.
did I create this term? I don't know. I mean,
Make
I'm
this.
not a PhD. I'm not that's not my path in life. But I actually was like, I've never heard this term. And I went and checked out through those advanced sites. Didn't pop up. It's not an existent term. So
And that's
plausibility,
just it.
yeah.
I was like, I know what he's talking about, but I've never heard it called this before. But it's
Sedation work
absolutely true.
sedation
Yeah.
works so much better when you decrease the little things and
Mhm.
so earplugs are a standard for me with my intubated patients that I'm trying to
Mhm.
keep comfortable and sedated. Blindfolds, respectfully, of course, not pushing their eyes down,
Right,
but like
right.
just
They're not a
blocking
fucking
over.
hostage. Like, yeah.
Sure, sure, and of course this is done once they're out, so they're not
Right.
panicking.
Right.
Because quite often
So
they're
it,
looking at you, and you're like, "It's okay. I'm going to sedate you more," and I'll explain what I'm doing. I
yeah.
said, "I'm raising your blood pressure, and then I'm going to sedate you more, so you are comfortable." And the family
Mhm.
loves it. The patient usually is like, like they're like,
And then they're
"Please."
out. Yeah.
Yeah, they're like, "Please, please, please." And then I just put a little light strip over, so just like you would if you were napping. And then you make them comfortable, and then you transport them across town. The vital signs are beautiful. The patient doesn't remember a thing. I say in the book too. There's an old transport joke, not joke, but an anecdote. Whereas if you're
Just
intubated,
saying.
yeah, as saying, if your intubated patient remembers you, you fucking suck.
Yeah.
I don't curse in the book because I want nurses to be able to give their
But
tears
the
speak.
message
But
is
it
there.
says you
Yeah.
suck. Your intubated patient shouldn't have any idea who you were. It's like your anesthesiologist. You shouldn't remember them.
Yeah, no, you shouldn't be looking up at these people while you're intubated. No.
No.
So yeah, I think that's very important. And that's even important outside of the critical care intubated. Like even if you just have a patient, like I said, I have patients that are at end of life. Many are not. So we're kind of a split unit. We do lots of things. We have like 6 beds that are palliative care beds. So we're active.
I saw that in your resume, and I was actually hoping we would get to that because
Yeah.
palliative care
So
is so brilliant.
it is. And so and we've gotten really good at it as a staff. But and you'd be surprised, like when we have doctors that are off service physicians or they're not familiar with palliative care, there's a lot of fear about the way we treat patients because we're not monitoring, we are not checking vitals repeatedly. We are treating them based on how they look. Do
Right.
they look comfortable? Do they look agitated? And sometimes it comes down to it. Sometimes I can give people all the drugs I want that is ordered, that's safe, and they're still not comfortable. But then you turn down the lights, you tell people to shut up. Well, you don't tell people to shut up. You say, like, I've had
You
family
don't?
members, no,
Oh,
not like that, not like that. Maybe my coworkers, like, I might be like, dude,
I'm so penitent at all times because I just have a I know. I'm like, would you mind kind of like I
would
guess
you try? Like, well, what I'll say to people is, like, I try, like, if I'm in a room, like, say I'm turning a patient, doing medication, whatever. Sometimes I've heard people like talking about super inappropriate stuff. What they did this weekend, I can hear it from in the room with the door closed. And I'll
yes,
actually go out and say, hey, I heard you talking about that lap dance, and I'm pretty sure the patient did too. So,
yeah, I have that problem being in the EMS world a lot because it's a frat house quite often,
hmm
and
hmm
it's 2019, and uh, you're in the beautiful state of Iowa. Is that
yes,
correct?
yes. I'm 4 hours west of Chicago.
Oh
If that
man.
gives you
Well,
I
I
grew I
lived.
grew up near Chicago, so.
Yeah, I lived in Chicago for a year doing military training, or a
Oh, where
year
you're
ish.
at?
Great Lakes, great
Oh yeah,
mistakes.
I
They
grew
called
up
it.
in
Yeah,
Park. So
Oh,
I was
awesome.
30
Yeah.
minutes outside the lakefront. So
I mean, now
um
all the military training for medics is down in Texas at this joint base, but when I did it in the dinosaur days, it was up at Great Lakes.
Great
So,
Lakes. Yep. Yeah, yeah.
so anyway, but where were we? Oh,
Oh, we were talking about God, what
I'm
were
having
we
so much
talking
fun.
about? I know, right? We were talking about God, I wish I could just rewind the recording.
I know.
We were talking about palliative care and like watching our patients and treating
Right, and
them. But
sedation
people get, oh,
and
you were talking about the frat house, the loud, the talk, the inappropriate.
oh yeah, the inappropriate talk. Yeah, I spend a lot of time with uh, very experienced critical care male and female nurses, male and female paramedics, and everyone hits a point at you talk about burnout a lot and ways to for nurses to prevent
Mhm,
it, and you're a
mhm,
very big advocate for mental health and
mhm.
wonderful things.
Absolutely.
Like I said, you and me need to, if I'm blessed enough to be invited back after
Uh-huh.
all this cursing on the Uncensored Nursing podcast,
Fit right in.
uh, I I have to pick my battles with checking people because I
Hmm.
just
Hmm.
all day every day I hear people just and we're in the age of the you know
Right. You
oh
got everything at your fingertips. Just
well I just mean like while you're
scroll
with
a
your
scroll.
patient.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
Oh, we're
Mm-mm.
in an offload delay. Oh, and the person's over there doing what I'm like, hey, patient, like
Yeah, like what?
I'm
Get
not
off,
saying you
get
can't
off your
check
fucking phone.
something. I'm not can't
No, but like that's not your primary focus.
I find myself having to check myself all the time, trying
Yeah.
to be appropriate and check other people. And it's not that I'm the professionalism police, but we all are the professionalism police.
Yeah,
And so
absolutely.
and you have to be able to nicely say, hey, listen, shut up.
And if somebody tells me to shut up, I shut up because you don't know who's listening. And on night shift, we sometimes get a little lax. We don't have as many family members. It's quiet. Like we have once in a while, there's downtime. We are like the potluck we are the best at potlucks on my unit. So like we have the potential for this kind of like jovial conversation and it gets louder and louder and louder. And before you know it, you've got a family member coming down the hall going, I can hear everything you're saying. And you're like, oh shit, what was I just talking about? You can't leave room for that because then what does that do for the trust and the comfort and the appearance of safety for your patients if they think you're in the back
Yeah.
break room having a fucking good old time? So there's a time and a place. As you know, I can curse with the best of them, but sometimes I have to check myself. And if someone checks me, I accept it. I don't get pissed. I don't get defensive. I just say, oh, sorry, didn't realize I was being loud. I
Right.
tone it down. But it's so important. And so that's true. The more we stimulate our patients, or like I've had those family members that are like, oh, he moved. Is he okay? Are you okay? Are you in pain? Do you need to pee? Do you have to? It's like, whoa, you're making me anxious. And I've even had to say to family members, I think that the stimulation that you're providing by talking to them is too much. I would
Yes.
encourage you maybe sit at the bedside quietly, hold their hand, see if they settle down. They've peed, they've been turned, they've had pain meds, they have fluid. Like everything is okay. Just you need to chill. And that's the beauty of ICUs sometimes is that you can say, visiting hours are now over.
Get out.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, I hear you. Um, and I love that scene from. Since I don't know why I'm on a Robin Williams kick today.
he's
I,
he's
I,
love him.
rest, rest in peace, brother.
Indeed.
But over a doorknob, like what happened that month? A Chester. It's depression. Depression. Let's talk about depression for a second. Can we do
Yeah.
that?
Yeah,
I've
yeah.
I've suffered from it my entire life, and
Hmm.
uh, I've overcome it in a lot of ways. And uh, I got a military background. I grew up with one non-psychotic parent that is my hero, and then moving on. Uh, we all deal with it. We all struggle with it, and since you have such a huge audience, and since we have I realize I just totally went from patient care to nurse care but
They're
let's talk.
intertwined. They're intertwined.
If you don't mind, let me just take a quick detour into that because I do
Yeah.
have a piece of advice for people, and I don't get paid any money for this. I don't work for the whatever company that makes this medication, but just be super candid. For years and years, I refused to take SSRIs for depression because there are certain side effects that a young man might want to avoid by taking
Yep,
SSRIs.
yep,
I
yep,
don't know
yep.
I'm not going to elaborate
I'm
on
I'm picking up what you're putting down. It's okay.
that, but I would rather be organically depressed than depressed because of that reason. And
Mm-hmm,
so,
mm-hmm.
all military men like myself were more or less forced onto our SSRIs. We're like, here's your bottle, here's your bottle, here's your bottle.
Standard issue.
You think? Yeah. And I just was like, this is murder. Like, I'm not doing this. Like, forget that. And I didn't take it serious. And I just moved on. And, I would occasionally Q4H, self-medicate with, you know, drown
Mm-hmm,
it down with
mm-hmm,
brown, I'm
mm-hmm,
saying.
mm-hmm.
And
Yeah,
that's
yeah.
not any kind of answer to anything, but I
And it's
just,
not sustainable.
no, it's not. And you can't be a winner and be a slave to an addiction
Mm-hmm.
that's not learning and excitement and all that kind of good stuff.
Right.
If Joe Rogan doesn't talk about it as an addiction, outside of the cannabis, of course, because none of us can do cannabis, which is fine. I don't, you know what? I can be a hero nurse that I love, and my whole life could be fulfilled, or I can smoke cannabis and
Right. What's the payoff? Like what's the thing you're
come
after
on.
here?
I made a decision years ago about that. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, I love Joe Rogan, but that
But
ain't
he's Joe Rogan. He gets to be Joe Rogan.
yeah, I can't do that. I can't play that world. And nursing is my life. So, and I'm a big advocate for what nurses can do to cope with that. The point of this is, if you allow me to make a medication plug,
Please do.
Wellbutrin. It turns out something else that I even said earlier, I was like, let's come back to this, Adrian. Smoking.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I was like Christopher Hitchens. I didn't give a fuck. Like,
Same.
I will smoke until it kills me. There was an old movie, Triple X, like Vin Diesel. He's like, one of the bad guys is like, I do not care. I will smoke even after it kills me. I like smoke better than air. I used to be that guy. I was like, oh, does smoking bother you? Well, I just could not care less. In California, no less, where that ain't cool.
Mm-hmm.
But I was so guilted out by it for years and years. And I know what I'm doing to myself. And I loved the way you phrased it so honestly in your blog or your vlog or wherever I saw it. And you have so much material. It's good for you.
Who can keep track?
Who can keep track of your success? But I love, because I have the same sentiment about smoking, except for I have something interesting to say about it.
Okay.
I quit smoking by accident.
What?
Yes. Who can ever say that? Me. Christopher Hitchens is my hero. He's my father, Christopher Hitchens, Miss Jenny, the love of my life, one of my greatest inspirations in life, Lucky the cat, and my brother. I think my brother ended up under Lucky the cat, but he'll get over that. In the forward, I was unapologetic, like, boom, I love smoking, and I want to be an artist and a writer and a blah blah blah. Who gives it? It turns out I talked to my physician, and we were just talking about. He goes, how's your depression? I'm like, oh, bad, but like my life is awesome. Like I'm a okay looking, like Caucasian dude living in Southern California in 2019 in America. Life is amazing. Like I have so many blessings and gifts, and like for me to ever think I'm having a bad day is an insult to the other 99% of the planet that doesn't get to eat today.
Right,
I have no right to ever be depressed and sad, regardless of what I've done or seen. That's horseshit.
Mm-hmm.
Because at the end of the day, it's still me, and I have to be me.
And someone else's suffering doesn't negate yours.
No, and I care and love about that, but I'm also a professional caregiver.
Mm-hmm.
So so I talked to my doctor, and he goes, have you heard about this new medication called Wellbutrin? And I say, no, I haven't. He goes, well, it's a antidepressant without any of those side effects that some people find so undesirable, essentially making you numb as a human being to the pleasures of being a human being. Right. And he goes, it's devoid of that. It's separate from SSRIs. It works in a completely different way. which I would have to Google because I'm not a chemist to explain properly.
Mm-hmm.
And he goes, let's try this and tell me what you think. I ramped up the dose, did it, ramped up to the next dose, and I've been on it for 3 or 4 years now. Within 6 months of starting, I started noticing that getting off the couch to go have a cigarette was work. It wasn't a desire. All of a sudden, I'm like, I have to go outside. Like it stopped being that thing that controlled me. And I'm a huge MMA fan, UFC fan, and I used to have a really bad habit. I would just watch fights on Fight Pass, and also I know I'm plugging the UFC. Oh, hi Dana White. Anyway, whatever. Dana would love it. Mwah,
Yes,
Dana.
she would.
That's actually a he. Big old. Anyway.
Oh, I thought. Sorry, Dana. Who?
Dana,
Tell me the name again.
Oh, Dana White.
I watched a little bit.
Yeah, Dana White's the
Okay.
The big, strong, powerful, bald dude who runs the UFC.
I need to see his face. Okay, yeah. Okay.
Yeah. Anyway,
I'm following you now. Sorry. I caught up.
Right. Anyway, so I would watch all these fights and on Fight Pass and all these things, and I had a bad routine of after every fight, it's a pay-per-view or whatever.
Oh yeah, him. Yeah, I had to Google him, but yeah. Okay.
Sure. Well, a couple things with him. Number one of my commandments is you're only as good as your last flight. I stole that from Dana White because he says you're only good as your last fight. So he won't mind. I love that. Had to take it tongue in cheek.
That's great.
Slight nurse comment. However, I would go out after every fight, have a cigarette, come back in. I'd go out after every fight, have a cigarette, come back in, or whatever during work. You want these breaks, you want these. Anyway, it all became a chore instead of something I wanted to do. And it turns out that I found out that Wellbutrin is prescribed to people for anti-smoking, for smoking cessation at lower dosages. And I was taking it at antidepressant dosages way higher. So I literally quit smoking by accident. Now, you catch me in Vegas on an off night, then all bets are off. But I'm just saying, I haven't bought a pack of cigarettes in 3 years. And I love the way you phrased it. You said, I hate myself. You didn't say you hate yourself, but you said, I'm so guilted by the 10 years I probably took off my life or something from poisoning myself nonstop. I smoked a lot for 15 years.
And I was smoking filter. I was hand rolling my own. So I was smoking filterless. Dude, not a prideful thing for me, but I smoked for 10 years. And
me too.
One morning I lost my bag of tobacco and was fucking nick fitting like nobody's business. And my partner was like, here's an e-cigarette. It starts now. And it took me a while to then wean off the e-cigarette, but that's how I did it. Because for me, it wasn't so much the nicotine, because I was able to
it's the
wean off of that. It's the fucking tactile, like always having your fingers, like go out to bars, you feel uncomfortable, you got to do something with your hands. Yeah. So that is what helped me. And people, like, there's all this shit now with like vaping and illness, and like I don't do that anymore. But that was the thing that it took to get me away from it. And so everybody's got this different journey, but it's true. Like, Wellbutrin, oops, I quit smoking. What a great way to do it, because then you don't have the fight to deal with that,
It truly, it's ironic, because Christopher Hitchens is a famous author, and he's my greatest hero, literary hero at least. And it was funny. I actually became a writer after I'd quit smoking, and I was going through all of this. And meanwhile, Christopher Hitchens, if you ever Google, oh my goodness, what's his name? Hunter S. Thompson.
Oh yeah.
Famous thing.
I know. Yeah, I know. Yeah.
If you just Google Hunter S. Thompson's daily ritual on Google, it'll come up, and it's one of the funniest. It was a newspaper article from like whenever, and it's one of the funniest things you'll ever read. It's just, and what's funny about it is it's not fictional. And Christopher Hitchens was at least that as well. And so it's ironic. The first time I become a published author, I did it. I wouldn't dare say sober, but I did it as a non-smoker, which I just felt like a traitor. I'm like, no, I'm going to live longer. I regret. I smoked for 10 to 15 years. I probably took 20 years off my life. And I deal with true smoker's guilt. I feel like that's a term that we aren't using enough now that we need to.
Yeah.
I feel bad about it. Like, I truly feel like, because I love life. I love living. Like, I got a good thing going in life.
Absolutely.
And you do too. I mean, we're at this very high level of awesomeness where we're able to help other people, and people listen to what we want to say, and they look up to us. And I feel like an idiot when I say, like, oh, yeah, by the way, I probably killed myself 20 years earlier by smoking for 10 years. Like, anyway, moving on. I don't even know how we got on that, but I thought it was important.
But it's true because I'm a pulmonary nurse and I work with pulmonary nurses who smoke. I work with respiratory therapists who smoke. I know a respiratory therapist that died from COPD. It's like it doesn't like we try to be the best providers we can be and we try to live what we're preaching, because we want to be healthy so that we can enjoy our lives. Two, we want to be healthy so we can keep doing what we're doing.
Right.
And three, we want to set a good example for people because we do, as nurses, we do have this like all except for 2011 or 2001, nurses are the most respected profession. And then, of course, when 9/11 happened, that honor went to those first responders. And I think those first responders, even though they're not the same as nurses, I think that we should share that spot because here, let's segue into this because this is something else I wanted to talk about. So there are a lot of things that I learned that I didn't know was a thing, but now that I think about it and as you describe it, I'm like, oh shit, Tomahawk rapid sequence intubation. Holy shit, dude. Please talk about that. Please talk about Tomahawk rapid sequence. First, let's back it up. First, for those who don't know, explain rapid sequence intubation, please.
Absolutely. Okay. There's two types. Well, there's intubation. Intubation is where we insert a tube into your trachea and we inflate a balloon. We insert the tube, we inflate the balloon, and that then allows us to ventilate through the tube for you in and out of your lungs. And that balloon prevents other fluids from any other source from going into your lungs, giving you pneumonia and killing you.
Mm-hmm.
Causing, or just causing.
Right. Mm-hmm. Yep.
Typically, you do that. Anybody could do that. Paramedics, advanced nurses, physicians. During ACLS, once you're doing CPR and the patient is, when you're doing resuscitation. Anybody can, not anybody, don't do it if it's not, you have a
No, but like there are many professionals
yes,
that are able
and
to.
you get either a direct DL laryngoscopy where you get a laryngoscope, you lift, this is the patient's head, you lift up their jaw,
You slide it down past
then you get a view,
mm-hmm.
you get down here like this, you lift up the jaw, then you insert the tube. And then
and
you inflate
you're like
the balloon.
at their head. You're like at the top of their head, looking down. So you're basically looking down at their face, looking down straight down their throat.
And then you're going to do video aspects of that where if you have a bad trauma neck, you don't have to go crank. You can just go in, and there's a
like video. A camera that can see.
Thank you. Yeah, oh my goodness, it's a simple word. Anyway,
whatever. Yeah.
Camera on the end, fiber optic.
Fiber optic. Sure.
There's a fiber optic camera at the end, and you're looking at it, and so you don't have to break that trauma neck, and you can go in and around and tube it that way. Well, there are also situations where Adrianne and I talked about this ahead of time about me and my Italian hands, but for this particular case, I'm going to do a side thing.
Sure.
So let's assume that the patient's head is here and their body is here. It's a situation, or perhaps the patient is leaned up against a wall. And an example of this would be a bad bar fight where we're called in, and you might have a Lefort 3 fracture. I like to go Lefort 1, this is broken. Lefort 2, that's broken. Lefort 3, this is all broken.
It's all broken.
That's a great little mnemonic for you. But sometimes you have floating faces, and if you lay them down, you're going to drown them with fluids going in, or shotgun blast to the face, and they miss, and then they don't. Then you might be talking about surgical airways or whatever. The point is, and I have my father, myself, and Miss Jenny all have some pretty cool Tomahawk story innovations. But I'll tell Miss Jenny's because it's the coolest. She did an upside down Tomahawk innovation from the roof of a vehicle. So we got a patient trapped in a car, and she crawled on the roof of the car. Scene was safe. Firefighters were on scene. There was no flames anymore, but the patient was pinned in, and they were cutting them out. And essentially, it's where you do an intubation from the front. And the patient was like on his side, smashed up this way, and she tried to intubate from the roof of the car. That wasn't working. Then she had to switch to the hood of the car. So now she's sitting on the hood of the car dealing with this gentleman whose head is smashed in this corner. and she has to try to intubate him from the front because there wasn't clearance to do it from the roof. So it's essentially where typically you hold the laryngoscope with your left hand and you place the tube with your right hand.
Mm-hmm.
Mirror image it, and now you are from the front pulling the jaw down or the video with your right hand and placing the tube with your left. You have to train this ahead of time.
No
but it's
shit.
essentially
I can barely brush my teeth left-handed.
Oh, it's ridiculously. It takes time, and you have to know what you're doing.
Mm-hmm.
But the point is how badass Miss Jenny is and my father are. And,
bravo.
and these things work, and these techniques you have to train. And there's actually, I've been in this one flight nurse boot camp where they actually.
Oh boy!
I'm almost like, how much should I say here? But they okay, I did this one.
I can cut out anything that doesn't.
All right,
let it fly.
I did this one training session where it was a team building exercise, and you had to. This was a regular intubation, but you were under a table, and we were pretending the patient was stuck in farm machinery, and you had to place an airway, but it was pitch black under there, and they put you in a flight helmet. It was pitch black, and they put Slayer on earbuds and put it blasting. Love in your ears, so you can't hear and you can't see, but you have a video laryngoscope, and the video thing for it, sometimes it's on the device. This was on a tether on a video thing like 4 feet back, and they set it on like your butt, and your paramedic partner is like holding your legs as you're down in this thing, and he's watching the video and you're not, and so he has to like
guide
tap you,
like in.
Go left, go right, go tap, go left. And we have to like work on it. It's a worst case scenario funny thing you practice, but essentially the point is the mastery they put you through before they ever let you get in these positions. Like people laugh about like, oh, he must be in love with himself. Well, look at all these certs. Look at all this. No, I do that because the job requires it. Like you can't walk onto this being a dummy. You can't there's nowhere to hide. It's like the UFC. It's like, I love saying I'm not a fighter or anything. I love jiu-jitsu, but I'm a glorified white belt. I'm nobody important. But you have to just be willing to bite down on the mouthpiece, get into these situations, and, whatever they throw at you, there's winning and there's losing. There's saving, and then there's
not.
And based on literally where you're at with your skills, it's one of those special places in life. Now, surgeons do this every day, 15 times before breakfast. So I'm not trying to diminish that. And there's so many more progressive medical fields where these people are just inspirational and genius and so many wonderful things, Navy SEALs and airline pilots and all that. I'm not trying to put this on that level or anything, but we're one-on-one or two-on-one, obviously, with our partners, and we're directly responsible for this. And that goes wrong so often. And then
you've even mentioned in the book that not only do you have to be on point when you're providing this care, this life-saving care, but then because you say your documentation has to be on point because everything is your fault. Unless you can prove otherwise, if somebody comes, and tries to like sue you because they think you didn't do so, you got to be able to say like, this is the only thing that's going to save you. Exactly. Fucking yes, absolutely. You need
the Flight Nurse Bible, 12 Flight Nurse Commandments. Number 8, everything is your fault. Document well. I mean, you need to document like your life depends on it, because in case you're one of those weird people that earning your nursing license wasn't the most amazing thing you've ever done in your life, you need to defend that shit. Like you need to chart like your life depends on it, because in my case, it does. It does. I mean, like if you're going to wear these silly shirts and if you're going to do these silly things and talk smack like I'm talking, right?
Gotta protect it.
Well, let's stop there for a second before we dive into part 3 of my conversation with author and flight nurse Robert P. Harris. Take a bathroom break or a sleep break, or just click right over to the grand finale of our marathon chat. But first, you guys, I can't not say it. Happy nursing. Here at Nursing Uncensored, we may be, well, uncensored, but we're not unfiltered. Protected health information has been changed and concealed to comply with HIPAA. The things we talk about are from years of experience with thousands of patients, things we've read, stories we've heard. If you think we're talking about you, we're not. Also, we're real nurses here to provide helpful and accurate information, but don't take anything we say as fact without doing your own research. Refer to your state's Board of Nursing, Practice Acts, and your institution's policies and procedures if you have questions about your practice. Lastly, our very strong opinions are ours alone and do not reflect those of our employers, educational, or professional institutions. Thanks for listening, and happy nursing, folks.